They stood on the wooden docks with ropes biting into their wrists. 3 captured women pirates staring at the soldiers who already knew their fate. What the crowd didn't know, and what history almost erased, is that the worst punishments were saved for women, not men. This is the part of piracy no one warned them about, and the part the world was never meant to see. Today we uncover what really happened to female pirates once they were captured, and why history tried so hard to bury the truth of their final days. This is not the Hollywood version. There are no romantic sea battles here, no dramatic last stands against unbeatable odds. This is the real story, drawn from court transcripts, execution logs, naval archives, and the few fragile documents that survived centuries of silence. For female pirates, the end was far more complicated and far more brutal than legend ever dared to describe. When a pirate ship was overtaken by British naval forces, the men were dragged out in chains without hesitation. But when women were discovered among the crew, everything changed. Officers froze in disbelief. Women weren't expected to fight. They weren't expected to lead raids or stand shoulder to shoulder in battle. Some officers assumed the women must have been kidnapped. Others believed they were disguising themselves, and a few simply refused to accept the reality that women had chosen this life and had thrived in it. So the women were separated instantly, not for protection, but because the officers didn't know what roles to assign to them. They weren't treated as soldiers. They weren't treated as civilians. They weren't even treated as pirates worthy of the same legal process as men. And that uncertainty opened the door to punishments far harsher and far less predictable than any male pirate would face. Interrogations began within hours. But these interrogations weren't about treasure, strategy, or the ships they had plundered. They were about identity. Were you disguised as a man? Were you forced to join the crew? Were you taken from your home? Or the most dangerous question of all, did you choose this life willingly? If a woman admitted she joined the crew by choice, her fate was sealed. If she denied it, officers accused her of lying. Either path led to danger. Even before the trial began, the wrong answer could turn a sentence from imprisonment into death. Once interrogations ended, the women were marched back to the deck, hands bound, to be displayed before the public. Male pirates were shackled and guarded. Female pirates were exhibited. Their punishment wasn't just about law, it was about shame. It was about sending a message to every woman watching from the crowd. This is what happens when a woman abandons her place. Crowds gathered along the docks before the prisoners even arrived. Some came out of fear, others out of morbid curiosity. Newspapers printed sensational headlines. People whispered stories about unnatural women who fought like devils on the sea. To the public, these women weren't criminals. They were violations of the natural order, and the colonies intended to make an example of them. When the women finally reached the courthouse, their battle shifted from surviving the sea to surviving society's judgment. The moment they entered the courtroom, every eye focused on them, not as pirates, but as women who dared to break the rules of their world. Trial transcripts were filled with lines like, "She behaved in a manner unbecoming of her sex," and "She dressed as a man and committed villainy upon the seas." These weren't criticisms. They were evidence. Evidence that a woman had stepped beyond what society allowed. Female pirates were punished for piracy, and punished again for rejecting womanhood. For some women, especially those as infamous as Mary Read or Anne Bonny, the court's obsession turned toward a single question. Were they pregnant? Pregnancy offered a rare form of temporary protection known as pleading the belly. If a woman claimed she was pregnant, the court was obligated to order a medical examination. If confirmed, her execution was postponed until after birth. But postponement was not mercy. Many women died in prison long before their due date. Disease, starvation, cold, and neglect were often the real executioners. Some women were quietly released to avoid scandal, others simply vanished from records, lost forever to time. And for those who weren't pregnant, the sentencing was swift and unforgiving. For many female pirates, their end came in one of three forms: execution by hanging, public, humiliating, and meant to inspire fear; imprisonment in colonial jails where survival was rare and suffering was constant; or exile and forced labor, which meant disappearing into distant colonies with no hope of return. Few documents recorded their final days. Fewer names survived. Unlike their male counterparts, whose stories were often dramatized and celebrated, the endings of female pirates were deliberately erased. History remembered their battles, but not their endings. And that silence reveals more than any legend ever could. Because female pirates didn't just break the law, they broke expectations. They challenged the belief that women didn't belong on ships, in battles, or in positions of authority. Their existence alone threatened the foundation of colonial society. So when they were captured, the system didn't simply punish them. It corrected them. It forced them back into the narrative it understood, a narrative where powerful women didn't belong. But here, their stories don't vanish. Here, their courage is remembered. Here, their final days speak louder than the silence history left behind. They stood on those docks with no mercy left for them, yet their defiance, their determination, and their refusal to accept the world as it was have survived centuries.